Hello everyone, this is CJ with Cycletron. Well, they say if you ride a motorcycle that it's just a matter of time before you're involved in some type of crash. I don't necessarily believe that, but from my own experience, it's been true at least a couple of times, and my oldest son was involved in a crash a few years ago. So let's get into the details. So I thought I would share with you what I consider to be important lessons from my experience. Keep in mind that I'm not an attorney, I'm not a medical professional, so you should seek out your own professionals if you have an accident situation that you're dealing with. Let's start out with a scenario that you're out riding your motorcycle and a car suddenly makes a left-hand turn in front of you. You end up impacting the car, going down on the roadway. Hopefully before impact you had your brakes covered, you're able to scrub off quite a bit of speed. But let's assume that you have some damage to your bike and some bruises and scrapes to your body, but otherwise you think you have no major injuries. Well, the first thing to do is to get yourself off the roadway and as far off the shoulder as possible. I wouldn't be in a hurry to try and pick up your bike and get it moved off the road. You may have more extensive injuries than you realize. That's masked by the rush of adrenaline, and those injuries could be compounded if you try and lift your bike and move it off the road. You could also expose yourself to getting hit by other vehicles while you're trying to move your bike off the road. So I'd say just stay off the road, just calmly assess your injuries or potential injuries, call 911 or have someone on scene call 911. I just look myself over really well, try to figure out if my helmet impacted the ground. If everything looks good, I try and get as much information from the scene. If I'm in a good enough shape to do it, I take pictures of the other vehicle, their license plate, the position of my bike before it was moved, get their insurance information. I wouldn't yell or confront the other driver if you think they're at fault. There's no point in getting an altercation. Just let the police arrive and handle it. You don't even have to talk to the other party if you don't feel like it. You just let the police gather all the information. If I had a GoPro or some other video recording system, I'd make sure I would secure all the video documentation with me. I wouldn't provide it to anybody on the scene. So the other thing is, don't apologize for anything. It's a common phenomenon that after a wreck that both parties start apologizing. I think that's less the case now because people are worried about the legal implications or more aware of the legal implications of making an apology or admitting fault. There could be a lot of things that contribute to a crash, and those factors are often not readily apparent at the time of the crash. It's probably best not to make any statements at all on scene. I've had good and bad interactions with the police in the past. I've had instances where I was stopped by the police for no other reason than me just riding a motorcycle. So because of these experiences, my standard operating procedure now in a traffic stop is to not provide any information that is unnecessary or potentially incriminating from their standpoint. For example, in a traffic stop, I'm sometimes asked where I came from or where I'm going. The problem with such questions is that they can lead to more unwanted questions. For example, let's say I'm going to a concert that's supposed to start in 30 minutes, but I'm 45 minutes away. The officer might infer that I'm speeding in order to make up time. Or say I just left a restaurant and that restaurant's known to serve alcohol. Is the officer going to infer that I was drinking before I left the restaurant? I mean, you get the idea. There's really no upside to answering such questions, especially if you're involved in a crash. I would just say, I was just involved in a crash. I'm shaken up. I just don't feel like talking right now. And I just want to wait for the ambulance. If you're confident that the other driver's at fault and you're in good enough condition, I would inquire from the officer whether they plan to issue a citation to the other driver. This is important because, for example, when I was in my 20s, I once had this woman that pulled out in front of my car. I ended up hitting the side of her vehicle. She was totally at fault for pulling in front of me. But her careless attitude afterwards was really infuriating to me as I ended up yelling at her, like, what's your problem? Why'd you do that? And that's not something I would do nowadays. I know better. But when the officer got there, she just sat in her car the whole time. And when the officer got there, she goes, "Oh my God, I'm glad you're here. I thought he was going to go crazy." And because of that, the officer told me he wasn't going to write her a ticket. I told him he better issue her a citation, otherwise I'd file a complaint with his department. He ended up giving her a ticket, which was good because it made it much easier for me to file a claim against her insurance. If she hadn't got a ticket, the insurance likely would have taken the viewpoint that people were equally at fault, or even I was at fault, and tried to deny the claim. So let's get back to our scenario. If someone calls 911 at the scene of your crash to attend to your injuries, don't be too quick to dismiss the potential for injury. Even if you feel fine, again, because of that adrenaline rush, it may mask some injuries. For example, I laid a bike down in Austin, Texas in the 90s. I hit the ground really hard, but was otherwise uninjured. I ended up riding my bike home after about 15-20 minutes of resting on the side of the road. The next morning when I woke up, I was so sore I could hardly move. So it may take time for these injuries to manifest themselves. So again, back to our scenario. Let's say the medical responders arrive to check you out. If you're not sure about the extent of your injuries, or if there is a need, I would go to the hospital to get checked out further. While on scene, the first responders will often want to cut all your gear off with medical shears because they don't want to risk further injury in taking your gear off. You know, my oldest son was involved in a crash a few years ago. He misjudged how close an oncoming car was when he pulled into traffic. He ended up getting over far enough, but still grazed the side of the car and went down hard on the roadway. He ended up with some road rash, but otherwise was fine. The road rash from when his leather jacket rode up. But the paramedics wanted to cut all his gear off, and he wouldn't do it. He took it off himself. But, keep in mind that insurance will typically cover the cost of replacement for all that gear, whether it's damaged from the crash or it's cut off by medical personnel. So I wouldn't get too hung up about them cutting the gear off. So let's say you have a friend or relative that takes you home after the crash. You've got the case number from the responding officer and all other pertinent information like the insurance information and so on. I'd follow up with law enforcement to get a copy of the crash report, which usually takes a few days for them to file, and notify your insurance company as soon as you can. Also, if you're injured or someone else is injured as a result of that crash, I would recommend that you contact an attorney to potentially represent you in that case. You want to make sure that your rights are preserved. Insurance companies will try to pay as little money as possible, or even avoid paying money altogether. They might somehow suggest that you contributed to the crash through inattention, speeding, etc., as a way to avoid a payout. In talking to law firms, I would suggest that you interview more than one potential firm. I would ask the firm whether they specialize in motorcycle crash cases. I'd ask what percentage of their cases are settled out of court. I would ask them how much they thought they could get for your particular case and their assessment of the probability of you winning your case or getting a good settlement. Some law firms just want a quick settlement for doing little to no work. And the insurance companies know of these firms. They get a reputation. And for this reason, if you're involved with such a law firm, the insurance company is probably going to offer a lowball amount, knowing that the law firm just wants to make a quick settlement. I would ask the law firm what their fees would be. If you have an injury and the other parties are at fault, the law firm will typically take the case on a contingency fee basis. This means you won't be charged any fees unless and until they win the case. Through a lawsuit or court settlement or just through a settlement with the insurance company. Often the law firm will take about 1/3 of your settlement amount in their fees if they're successful. So by talking to more than one firm, you have a good chance to negotiate a lower contingency fee, which would provide more money in your pocket once you win. So please note, I am all for taking personal responsibility when appropriate. If I'm at fault and no one's injured, I won't involve an attorney. A few years ago, I laid my bike down when I rode over a pile of gravel in the roadway. I was going about 10 miles an hour and I went to a full stop in less than a second and tipped my bike over on the side. The bike kind of went over the side and I went along with it. It turns out that there's AT&T was putting in a fiber optic line and bored into a high pressure water main, which blew out a big crater in the roadway that the construction crews backfilled with loose gravel without compaction. So it was just like sinking into quicksand. So I ended up with a big scratch on my engine case, but was otherwise unhurt. I notified the city public works department about the hazard, and they weren't happy with AT&T for a variety of reasons and suggested that I file a claim against AT&T. And I told them I wasn't going to do that. First, I wasn't hurt. Second, it was just a scratch on my engine case that I could touch up with paint. And third, I'm the one that decided to ride through a kind of a sketchy situation with the gravel in the first place. But, aside from situations like this, when someone is clearly at fault and causes you injury, you'll want full compensation for any medical bills you may have, any lost wages, gear replacement, and repair or replacement of your motorcycle. You might even be able to get a no-charge rental vehicle while you're out trying to get your bike repaired or replaced. And in some cases, there may be additional money for pain and suffering or even punitive damages if assessed through a court order. Now, I've had other vehicles damaged in the past from other drivers. The insurance company tried to settle the claim based on the initial estimate from the repair shop. If I had fallen for that, I would have had to sign a full release, and I would have been done getting any more money if I had subsequent medical bills or anything else like that. So I always tell the insurance company, you just deal with the body shop directly and you pay the final bill. Sometimes they'll issue a two-party check to you and the repair company, but make sure it's for the full amount. If you're asked to sign any kind of release, I definitely have my insurance company or an attorney review it before you signed it. But chances are the insurance company is going to total your bike. They won't have it repaired. You'll just get a check for the fair market value of the bike and the pre-crash condition. And that's going to be based on the type of bike, make, model, year, and its condition before the crash. Keep in mind that most states have insurance regulations that will require a motorcycle to be totaled out if the repair cost meets a certain threshold. Where I live, that threshold is 70%. So let's say you have a bike that's worth $5,000 and the repairs are going to be $3,500 or more. The insurance company is going to cut me a check for $5,000. I won't have the option of getting it repaired. They'll also typically total the bike out if there's a scratch in the frame or the swing arm, or there's some aspect of the repair that might create a high potential for liability down the road that they just don't want to deal with. Happens with cars all the time. If the airbag's been deployed, they'll often total the vehicle out. If this happens, your bike's totaled, the insurance company will usually auction the bike off at a salvage yard like Copart. I've got a full video about this, links in the description for how to get a bike at a Copart salvage auction. Earlier I mentioned that you should maintain possession of any video that you may have at the time of the crash. In the United States, we still have some rights, including the 4th and 5th Amendment. So the police just can't take your GoPro video without a warrant. I would maintain possession of this video and turn it over to my attorney. Also, I wouldn't post any of this video or any discussion about the crash on social media. I wouldn't talk to anybody about it. I just talk to my attorney or insurance company. And I wouldn't do any kind of discussion or posting until after all claims have been settled. If there's other video unrelated to the immediate time of the crash, like it might show me going 40 miles an hour in a 35 mile an hour zone earlier in the day, or a little more spirited riding in certain parts of town, that video doesn't need to see the light of day. Now keep in mind, if you're subject to a discovery order or a court order to turn over that video evidence, it's too late to really delete anything. But as far as I'm concerned, before that happens, it's fair game. But once a legal request has been made, you got to turn it over. If you don't, you could face sanctions, or at the very least, you could end up tanking your case because it looks like you're trying to hide something. In summary, don't be too quick to dismiss the potential that you have injuries from a crash. Find out if the responding officer plans to issue a citation to the other driver. Don't admit any type of fault on the scene. Follow up and get a copy of the report. Contact your insurance company. Retain an attorney if needed. Don't talk about the details of the accident with anyone but your attorney or insurance company, and certainly don't post any details about it on social media before your case has been settled. Hopefully you won't need to use any of these tips, but if you do, I hope they're helpful. Please let me know about your experiences following a claims from a motorcycle crash in the comments section, and please stay tuned for future videos. Thanks very much.